They say that every family has secrets, but ours were soaked in bourbon and sealed behind a smile. My name is Emily, and I'm a woman who had to choose between loyalty and truth, between the family that raised me and the brother who is slowly dying because of him. I never imagined that one Christmas night would be the spark that ignited a firestorm of betrayal, revelation, and eventually, justice. But I remember it like a scar, vivid, sharp, and impossible to ignore. The house was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, the smell of glazed ham, and cinnamon sugar cookies. My parents' annual holiday party was always a small-town spectacle, and growing up, I didn't question it. Drinking was just what you did, whether you were 25 or 12. I learned how to pour a perfect shot of whiskey before I learned algebra. It was a rite of passage, a training night, they called it. But that Christmas, everything came to a head. I'd been sober for 2 years, finally clawing my way out of the haze they'd buried me in for most of my childhood. My sobriety wasn't just recovery, it was rebellion. And that night, I saw Kyle, my older brother, stumbling near the fireplace, his skin yellowed, his eyes glassy. Everyone laughed when he collapsed. I didn't. I screamed. I tried to call 911, but my mom grabbed the phone out of my hand. "You're overreacting," she said, slurring. "He's just had too much fun." But Kyle wasn't breathing right. He was gray. So I ran down the icy driveway, barefoot and shaking, dialing 911 with frozen fingers. When the paramedics arrived, Mom wailed like I'd stabbed her. "She's ruining Christmas," she shouted as they loaded Kyle into the ambulance. My dad punched the garage door in fury. I went with Kyle, leaving behind my coat, my dignity, and the only home I'd ever known. As if to prove her point, my phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. "This is Benji.
Can't use my phone.
Your parents are at the bar with the other 5 families, talking about a unified front. Be careful." I stared at the screen, stunned. The 5 families. The Johnsons, the Patters, the Garcias, the Williams, the Thompsons. All with kids our age. All with secrets. "They're circling the wagons," I whispered. Dr. Chin nodded grimly. "You've threatened more than your parents. You've threatened an entire culture." Then my phone rang. Kyle's name lit up the screen. I answered with shaking hands. "You need to stop," he croaked. His voice was barely there. "Kyle, you're in the hospital. You're dying."
No.
They said I'm fine.
Just stressed about the baby.
Mom and Dad explained everything.
My throat closed.
"Benji told me about the AA meetings, Kyle. I know you tried to get help." Silence. Then, "I don't know what you're talking about. You're confused. You need help." The line went dead. I stared at the screen, gutted. They'd gotten to him. Even dying, Kyle couldn't break free. I buried my face in my hands. Dr. Chin squeezed my shoulder. "Addiction isn't just chemical," she said. "It's psychological. The chains are strongest in the mind." I tried to fight back. My boss at the college bookstore offered me more hours. My advisor helped apply for emergency aid. The sober group started a GoFundMe. But for every inch forward, my parents shoved me 2 back. They called my job, told them I was unstable. They contacted my professors, claimed I needed medical leave. Then, at my motel, broke and barely hanging on, came the knock. 2 officers. "Your parents have filed an emergency psychiatric hold," one said. "We have statements from family, community. You've been making threats, calling 911 with false reports." "That's not true," I screamed, but it didn't matter. The paperwork was signed by a judge, one who played in my dad's bowling league. I was handcuffed, dragged to a psychiatric facility an hour away. The more I tried to explain, the more paranoid I sounded. "They made me drink growing up," I pleaded. "They forced Kyle too. Our whole neighborhood covers for them." "Have you been taking any substances?" the nurse asked calmly.
No.
"I'm sober." "Your parents say you've been drinking heavily." She made a note. I could feel it, the trap snapping shut. My marathon training became obsessive exercise. My work with sober groups became cult behavior. I was placed in a room with a woman who talked to invisible ghosts. No phone. No way to reach Dr. Chen. Just white walls and panic. The next morning, Dr. Patel, a young psychiatrist, interviewed me.
I try to stick to facts, to sound sane.
Your parents provided diary entries, he said. You wrote that you hated them. When I was 15, I argued. We all say that at 15. They also have videos of you pretending to be drunk. I froze. Performances I gave to survive, now used against me. I was faking so they'd leave me alone, I whispered. So, you were deceptive, he concluded. Every truth I offered twisted into a symptom. I begged him to call Dr. Chen. He said he would. But I could tell he thought I was just another breakdown. 72 hours passed in a blur of group therapy and soul-splintering silence. Then, finally, on day 3, Dr. Patel's face changed. We spoke with Dr. Chen, he said. And others, your advisor, your employer, your support group. Their version doesn't match your parents'. Relief made me dizzy. So you believe me? I asked. He hesitated. I believe there's more here than we understood. But your parents remain your medical proxy through their insurance. They're insisting on treatment, but I'm not a danger. Legally, no. But they can still make life hard. He recommended discharge. I was released homeless, jobless, cut off, but free. What I didn't know then was that the war had only just begun. I stepped out of the psychiatric facility clutching my discharged paperwork and a phone that had exploded with 3 days' worth of messages. Most of them were poison, from cousins, neighbors, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. How could you do this to your parents? One said. You're sick, said another. But buried in the bile were lifelines. Jessica messaged me. My dad said your mom tried to get him to lie about you.
He refused.
Stay strong. My old marathon coach texted. Your spot is still yours. Don't let them break you. And then Benji, sweet, defiant Benji. Kyle's asking for you. He's scared. Even Alexander messaged. I hadn't expected that.
I'm sorry.
You were right. Kyle told me everything. He needs you. Her words lit a fire in me. I didn't even stop to breathe. I raced to the hospital, my heart thudding like I was sprinting a race I hadn't trained for. The ICU smelled like antiseptic and grief. Beeping monitors, hushed voices, people on the edge of life and death. I found Kyle's room. I nearly didn't recognize him.
Pale.
Paper-thin skin. Hollow cheeks. Machines everywhere. But his eyes opened when I entered. You came, he whispered. Of course I came, I choked out. Mom and Dad, they brought me beer yesterday. Said it would make me feel better. Tears slipped down his face. I couldn't say no. I never can. My whole body trembled. Kyle, you're dying. He didn't deny it. The doctors won't say it, but I know. My body's shutting down. I gripped his hand. We'll get you on the transplant list. There's still time. Mom and Dad won't consent, he said. They said our family doesn't take parts from dead people. That we just need to tough it out. I couldn't speak. The cruelty, the pride, the blind devotion to tradition, it was killing him. Alexander was there too, in the corner, face puffy from crying. I begged them, she said softly. They told me if I kept pushing, they'd get me declared an unfit mother. I nodded slowly. They put me in a psych ward for telling the truth. They destroy anyone to protect their image. A nurse came in and checked Kyle's vitals. She frowned at the screen. His numbers aren't good, she murmured. Have they made a decision about the transplant? They're still thinking, Kyle said weakly. The nurse's expression said everything. Time was running out. When she left, Kyle turned to me. In my apartment, he rasped. Under the bed, there's a box. Everything's in there. Journals. Recordings. Medical records I hid. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen, I said quickly. Promise me, he insisted, stronger now. Promise you'll use it. Don't let them win. I promise, I said, even though I felt my heart tearing. My big brother, the boy who'd once carried me on his shoulders, who used to sneak me candy before dinner, was preparing for the worst. I left the hospital that night with his apartment key in my pocket. The December wind slapped my cheeks as I climbed the stairs to his third-floor unit. The place reeked of old beer, decay, and despair. But under the bed, exactly where he said, was the box. I opened it with shaking hands. Journals, detailing every attempt he'd made to get sober, all ending the same. Mom and Dad found out. They showed up at the meeting. Lab results hidden from them, showing liver enzyme levels that screamed danger. And at the bottom, a USB drive labeled insurance. I plugged it into his laptop. Dozens of videos. Kyle secretly recording. Mom pouring beer into his juice at breakfast. Dad threatening to disown him if he ever embarrassed them by going to rehab. Footage of Kyle begging for help, and Dad smashing his AA chips with a hammer. My hands shook as I clutched the USB. Then my phone buzzed again. It was Alexander. Kyle's asking for you. Hurry. Back at the hospital, chaos waited. Mom and Dad were in Kyle's room with a lawyer, papers spread across the bed. Just sign here, Mom said sweetly, pressing a pen into Kyle's hand. Power of attorney. You'll feel so much better. I burst through the door. Don't sign anything, I shouted, racing to the bed. Dad's face went red. Security. She's violating a restraining order. But I was already shoving the documents aside, holding up the USB. I have your videos, Kyle. Everything you documented. Mom lunged for it, but Alexander stepped between us. I called them, she said, steady. I couldn't let them do this anymore. Security appeared, but so did Dr. Chin, waiting in the hallway like a guardian angel. I'm this patient's physician, she said smoothly. Everyone out, except immediate family. We are immediate family, Dad barked. The patient has requested only his sister remain, Dr. Chin countered, checking the chart. Please respect his wishes. Uncle Tony tried to argue, but Dr. Chen's tone turned ice cold. Sir, this is a medical emergency. Leave now, or I'll have security escort you out. They left, but Mom hissed at me on the way out. This isn't over. Kyle grabbed my hand. Play the videos. For the doctors. For everyone. Dr. Chin called in the hospital's patient advocate and the on-call psychiatrist. Together, we watched every heartbreaking clip. By the end, the psychiatrist's face was pale. This is clear evidence of abuse, she said. We're contacting Adult Protective Services. And we'll expedite the transplant evaluation. But will he qualify? I asked. He's documented forced consumption. It changes everything. For the first time in years, Kyle looked hopeful. But I knew the reprieve would be brief. And I was right. Within an hour, the hospital administrator arrived, and not alone. With him were Uncle Tony and a judge. Another of Dad's golf buddies. We have a court order, the administrator said quietly. Your parents retain medical decision-making authority. Based on what? I snapped. Based on their daughter being mentally unstable and manipulating their son, the judge said. I've seen the documentation. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Your Honor, I said, voice shaking, are you aware you've been golfing with my father for 15 years? That you attended his birthday party where alcohol was served to minors? The judge flushed red. Young lady, you're bordering on contempt. I'm bordering on the truth, I snapped. How much did my dad donate to your campaign? Uncle Tony lunged for my phone, but it was too late. I'd uploaded everything to the cloud. The administrator shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we should review this more thoroughly. And then, like some kind of miracle, Jessica's father walked in. He looked exhausted, but determined. I'm here to provide testimony, he said, about how these families coordinated to silence their children. About what really happened when my daughter called CPS. Behind him came 3 other parents, the same 5 families, but they weren't here to defend my parents. They were here to tell the truth. Mrs. Johnson spoke first, her voice trembling. My son is in rehab. Has been for 6 months. I stayed quiet because we all made a pact to protect the tradition. Her eyes flicked to my parents who had just stormed back into the room, lips tight with rage. But that pact nearly killed my child. Mr. Peters followed, shoulders slumped. My daughter tried to harm herself last year. She was 15. I should have said something then. The room erupted. Dad's voice boomed over everyone else, screaming about loyalty, betrayal, family. Mom screeched that everyone was jealous of how close we were. Uncle Tony threatened lawsuits. But the dam had broken. Mrs. Garcia pulled out her phone and showed photos of bruises on her son's arms. He refused to drink, she whispered. This is what his father did. Mr. Thompson, quiet, meek Mr. Thompson, admitted he'd been sneaking out to Al-Anon meetings, terrified of what his wife might do if she found out. The judge, realizing the nightmare he'd walked into, made a quick exit. The hospital administrator stood there frozen, clearly rethinking everything. And then, over the chaos, Kyle's monitor began to beep in rapid succession. The nurse rushed in. His breathing had worsened. His skin had turned a pale, almost gray color. Dr. Chen pushed through the crowd. We need to get him on the transplant list now, she ordered. He doesn't have time. I turned to the room. I consent. Uncle Tony scoffed. You have no legal authority. But Alexander stepped forward, holding up a document. Actually, she does. Kyle and I got married yesterday in the hospital chapel. Her voice was steady. And I'm designating her as our medical proxy. The room went silent except for Mom's shrill scream, a sound so raw it rattled the windows. You manipulative little, the psychiatrist stood abruptly. I'm placing a 72-hour psychiatric hold on both parents. Their behavior is erratic and dangerous. You can't do that. Dad lunged toward her, but security stopped him. He and Mom were dragged away, kicking and howling. But I saw it in their eyes, the shattering. The realization that they'd finally lost control. The rest of the day blurred into one long stretch of phone calls, paperwork, consultations. Kyle was rushed into pre-op. Dr. Chen pulled every string she could, and finally, a match was found. A viable liver from a young accident victim. Surgery was scheduled within 2 hours. I sat beside Kyle's bed, holding his hand as nurses prepped him. If I don't make it, he began. You will, I said quickly. But if I don't, he insisted, use everything in that box. The videos, the journals. Don't let them do to others what they did to us. I promised him, even as my chest felt like it was breaking open. And then he was wheeled away. Alexander and I sat in the waiting room, surrounded by coffee cups, paperwork, and a silence so heavy it made my ears ring. My phone buzzed constantly. Relatives trying to guilt me. Friends asking questions. Facebook was a war zone. Half the town split down the middle between family values and protecting children. Benji texted, Your parents just got banned from the bar. Finally.
Proud of you.
Jessica showed up with coffee. My dad's pressing charges, she said, sitting beside me. For what happened when I was 15. Others are too. It's destroying everything, I murmured. She looked at me, eyes clear.
No.
It's revealing what was already destroyed. We waited. 8 hours. 8 long hours. Finally, the surgeon came out, his scrubs soaked with sweat. The transplant was successful, he said. He's stable. You can see him soon. Alexander and I collapsed into each other, sobbing.
Kyle was alive. Alive.
That word suddenly felt like a miracle. He would get to meet his daughter. He would get a second chance. But we all knew the war wasn't over. Over the next few days, the legal battles exploded. My parents, released from their hold, returned with a vengeance. They hired the most expensive legal team in the state. They sued the hospital. Sued Dr. Chen. Sued me, Alexander, the other families who had spoken up. They went scorched earth. I became a full-time legal defendant. I shuttled between courtrooms and hospital rooms, helping Kyle recover while fielding depositions and affidavits. My job at the campus bookstore let me go. I'd missed too many shifts. My professors gave me incompletes. My marathon training died entirely. But every sleepless night was worth it when I saw Kyle improve. Slowly, the yellow left his skin. His hands stopped shaking. His voice grew stronger. I want to go to rehab, he told me one morning. 90 days. I want to learn how to live without it. I nodded, tears in my eyes. What about mom and dad?
I asked. He looked away.
I don't care what they do anymore. I'm done living for their approval. Alexander began writing everything down for their daughter. So she knows, she told me. So she understands why we don't talk to her grandparents. I nodded. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were building something new. And then the trials began. 3 months after that fateful Christmas. I took the stand first. Told the court everything. About training nights, about the forced drinking, about Kyle's collapse, about being institutionalized for telling the truth. Kyle testified too from rehab. The other children followed, their stories harrowing and heartbreaking. My parents' defense was predictable. We were liars, ungrateful, bitter kids who didn't understand family tradition. But the evidence was undeniable. The videos, the journals, the testimonies from doctors, advocates, even Jessica's father. My parents were convicted on multiple counts: child endangerment, assault, contributing to the delinquency of a minor. They received only 2 years, but it was enough to destroy their empire. Their reputations disintegrated. My parents, released from their hold, returned with a vengeance. They hired the most expensive legal team in the state. They sued the hospital, sued Dr. Chen, sued me, Alexander, the other families who had spoken up. They went scorched earth. I became a full-time legal defendant. I shuttled between courtrooms and hospital rooms, helping Kyle recover while fielding depositions and affidavits. My job at the campus bookstore let me go. I'd missed too many shifts. My professors gave me incompletes. My marathon training died entirely. But every sleepless night was worth it when I saw Kyle improve. Slowly, the yellow left his skin. His hands stopped shaking. His voice grew stronger. I want to go to rehab, he told me one morning. 90 days. I want to learn how to live without it. I nodded, tears in my eyes. What about mom and dad? I asked. He looked away. I don't care what they do anymore. I'm done living for their approval. Their network of influence collapsed. Their story, the Golden family with deep community ties, was over. I returned to Oregon State that fall. Financial aid came through. I picked up 3 jobs, exhausted but determined. The sober support group welcomed me back like a lost sibling. Kyle graduated from rehab and started working at a recovery center. He spoke at meetings, told his story, became someone others looked to for hope. Alexander gave birth to a healthy baby girl. They named her Sophia. And she would never know the taste of beer before she could ride a bike. She would never be told drinking was love. The other families scattered.
Some sought help.
Others disappeared. The neighborhood felt different. Quiet, like a decades-long hangover, was finally lifting. That spring, I ran my marathon. My time was terrible. I hadn't trained. But I crossed the finish line. Jessica was there cheering. Kyle couldn't come. He was speaking at a conference, but he sent a text. Proud of you. Mom and Dad saw the article in the paper. They're furious.
Perfect.
We never spoke to our parents again. They moved 2 towns over, joined a new church, started spinning new lies. Some days I'd hear through the grapevine about their latest version of the truth. We were manipulative, ungrateful, addicts looking for attention. But Kyle was alive. Sophia was safe. And the cycle was broken. A year passed. Then 2. And still, we didn't speak to our parents. Not a message. Not a letter. Not a knock at the door. They tried early on once. A handwritten note arrived for Kyle at the recovery center, full of veiled accusations and shallow concern. Signed only, Love, your mother and father. He burned it without opening the envelope. I saw the way his jaw trembled, but he never talked about it again. Alexander kept her promise too. Sophia grew strong and confident, bright eyes, squealing laughter, and not a drop of poison in her cup. I babysat often while Kyle rebuilt his life, hour by hour. He was attending night classes, training to be a certified addiction counselor. The boy who used to sit slumped at a kitchen table, swallowing down liquor and silence, now stood before groups of strangers, sharing his story. Sometimes I watched him speak, how the room would grow still, how people leaned forward, needing to believe that someone like him could make it out. But even with all the progress, the damage still lingered in strange, quiet ways. I'd wake up gasping from dreams of being locked in a psych ward, unable to scream loud enough. Kyle would flinch if he smelled certain colognes, our father's favorite. Alexander, strong as she was, confessed once that she still kept a packed bag hidden in the back of the closet, just in case they ever came for Sophia. Trauma doesn't just vanish. It burrows. It hibernates. But we were learning to live beside it instead of inside it. One night, after Sophia had gone to bed, we all sat on the couch watching old home videos, back when we were little and still thought birthday.
Perfect.
Candles were magic, and our parents' laughter meant safety. The footage showed Kyle holding my hand at a school talent show, whispering encouragement as I trembled in front of the microphone. "You were always braver than me," he said, smiling faintly.
No, irraplia.
"I just had you." Around that time, I was invited to speak at a local conference about generational trauma.
The request terrified me.
My story wasn't something I'd ever imagined telling out loud. I'd lived it, breathed it, fought through it. But speaking it into existence for others? That was different. Still, I said yes. The day of the talk, I stood backstage, palms sweaty, trying not to bolt. Jessica was there. Alexander. Kyle sat in the front row, holding Sophia in his lap, his eyes locked on mine. I took a breath and walked out. I spoke for 40 minutes. I didn't use notes. I didn't need to. I told the truth. About a little girl raised in a house where alcohol was love, silence was survival, and truth was a punishable offense. I told them about Kyle, about the psych ward, about the lies and the manipulation, and the day it all cracked open.
And then I told them about now.
About Sophia. About breaking the cycle. The room was silent for a long moment after I finished, and then it erupted into applause. People stood. Some cried. Others lined up to speak with me afterward, sharing their own scars. "You gave us words," one woman whispered, gripping my hand. "I didn't know how to explain my childhood until you spoke it." The more I talked, the more I realized how deeply this sickness had infected entire generations. One man told me his father used to make him drink shots for every bad grade. A woman said her brother died of liver failure at 23, and her family still called it a weak constitution. It wasn't just us. It was everywhere. The rot ran deep. But so did the will to heal. So I kept going. Speaking, writing, building a network of survivors who supported each other. I launched a nonprofit with Kyle and Alexander, Second Sunrise, dedicated to helping children raised in alcohol-dependent homes navigate their healing. We started small. A website. A few virtual meetings. But it grew. Within a year, we had chapters in 5 states. People finally had a place to go where they weren't told they were overreacting, where no one tried to gaslight them into silence. Still, not everything was triumph. The backlash came too. Online trolls, some distant relatives, others just angry people, accused us of shaming families, destroying traditions. My parents gave interviews to anyone who would listen. Spun new lies. That we were addicts. That we'd faked the videos. That Kyle's illness had been exaggerated for sympathy. At first, their words cut deep. But over time, they became background noise. Because every week, we helped someone new. Every month we heard from another survivor who said, "I thought I was crazy until I found your group." That was louder than anything they could scream. One day, I received a certified letter in the mail. It was from our parents' lawyer. The letter was short, formal. "Be advised that your actions have permanently severed your inheritance rights. You are hereby disowned from the family estate." I read it 3 times. Then I laughed. It was meant as punishment. It felt like liberation. I threw it away without responding. Kyle did the same when he received his copy. "I don't want anything from them," he said simply. "I have what matters." He was holding Sophia in his arms at the time, her head nestled into his shoulder, her fingers clutching the collar of his shirt. I believed him. That Christmas, the 3rd since everything began, we gathered at my apartment. Just me, Kyle, Alexander, Sophia, Jessica, and a few others from our support group. We played board games, made non-alcoholic cider, and took turns sharing what we were grateful for. When it was Kyle's turn, he paused, blinking back tears. "I'm grateful I got a second chance," he said. "And I'm grateful my daughter will never have to unlearn the things we did." Sophia clapped, not understanding, but sensing the warmth in the room. The next day, I woke to a single text message from an unknown number. It was a photo. Kyle and Sophia at the park, bundled in scarves, his eyes crinkling with a real smile, hers mid-giggle. The message read, "Thank you for fighting when I couldn't." I sat on the couch staring at the image for a long time, tears slipping silently down my cheeks. We had lost everything. Our childhood home, our extended family, the illusion of safety we once clung to. But Kyle was sober. Sophia was safe. The chain of abuse had snapped. We didn't just survive. We stopped it from continuing. And that was everything. Months passed, then seasons. And still, life moved forward. Not perfectly, not painlessly, but with purpose. Kyle completed his certification and began working full-time as a counselor at the recovery center that once saved him. I watched him thrive in a way I'd never imagined possible when he was lying unconscious on a hospital bed, tubes everywhere, liver failing, eyes dull with defeat. He was different now, steadier, focused. He had a ritual before every group session. He'd hold his AA chips in his hand, not to measure sobriety by time, but to remember each moment he chose life. Sometimes he'd let Sophia play with them when he wasn't looking, and I'd catch him smiling, the kind of smile that doesn't just stretch across your mouth, but all the way to your soul. I found my own footing too. The nonprofit grew, its roots digging deep into the places where pain festered in silence. We began working with schools, offering trauma-informed workshops for teachers and students. We created a podcast where survivors shared stories, raw, unpolished, and necessary. I published essays, spoke on panels, even gave a TEDx talk titled Unlearning Home, Healing from Generational Addiction. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was screaming into a void. People were listening, believing, changing. Sometimes I'd reread Kyle's journals, the ones from the box under his bed, where he scribbled thoughts he never dared say aloud. I want to be sober more than I want to be loved. But I'm terrified no one will love me if I stop. That line stuck with me. Because I knew that feeling. I'd lived it. We both had. But now, here we were, loved without conditions, sober without shame. There were setbacks, of course. Trauma doesn't follow a linear path. Sometimes Kyle would wake up in a cold sweat from dreams of our father slamming fists into tables, screaming about respect. Sometimes I'd see a girl on campus wearing my mother's perfume and have to sit down, breathless, dizzy, irrationally afraid. Healing is not a straight road. It zigzags, loops, doubles back. But every time we stumbled, we had each other to lean on. We weren't alone in the darkness anymore. Sophia turned 3 that spring. We threw a party at the park. Just close friends, cupcakes, bubbles, and a bounce house. Kyle grilled hot dogs. Alexander set out handmade decorations. I sat on the picnic blanket watching Sophia chase butterflies with absolute joy, and my throat tightened. Not with grief, with gratitude. That she would never know the weight of a wine bottle slammed on a counter, or the sound of forced laughter masking fear, or the pressure to raise a glass when all she wanted was to run free. That cycle was gone. Not just broken. Buried. I still remember the last time I saw our parents, not in person but in a local news article a neighbor forwarded. They'd opened a new family values community group in a neighboring town, preaching about traditional bonding and the sacredness of heritage. My mother looked thin, brittle. My father's eyes were sharp, but dull behind the performance. They'd found another audience, another room of people willing to ignore the stench behind the wallpaper. But I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Pity had replaced rage. Because they were still trapped in the cage we escaped. Still building their legacy from a poison cup. Still pretending their children were the problem instead of the price. I kept the USB. The box. Kyle's journals. All of it. Not out of bitterness, but as proof. Evidence. A warning and a weapon. Because someday someone might need to see it, might need to know they're not alone, might need to understand that survival is possible, even if you're outnumbered, outcast, or out of strength. Especially then. On the 5th anniversary of that Christmas night, the one that cracked everything open, Kyle, Alexander, Sophia, and I sat on the porch of our new house. It wasn't big, just a 2-bedroom rental in a quiet neighborhood. But it was ours. Safe. Sober.
Real.
Kyle handed me a mug of cocoa. Sophia slept on Alexander's lap, curled like a kitten. Do you think they ever think about us? He asked quietly. About what they did? I took a sip and watched the stars blink above us. I think they remember what they need to keep believing the lie. He nodded. And we remember everything else. Exactly. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the same place I once feared, now transformed. I opened my laptop and began writing. Not just for me. For everyone still sitting at tables full of forced drinks and silent screams. For everyone still wondering if they're imagining the cruelty, if they're wrong for wanting peace, if they're broken for not laughing along. I wrote the truth. Raw and untidy and full of love. And when I finished, I hit publish. The next morning, I woke to hundreds of messages. Stories.
Tears.
Thank yous. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't even just a survivor. I was a voice.
A guide.
A mirror for those still trapped in the dark, waiting to be seen. If you're one of them, reading this, watching this, wondering if it's too late, I want you to hear me clearly. It's not too late. You're not broken. You are not the shame they tried to wrap around you. You are the ending they never planned for. You are the beginning of something different. And if it costs you everything to be free, then it's worth everything. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe to Kindle Stories Official. Your support helps us share more real, raw, and powerful stories like this one. Until next time, stay strong and keep turning the page.